I just smiled. No one understood. The night I found out my husband was cheating on me, I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't cry on the bathroom floor. I sat across from Damien at the dining table, looked him in the eyes, and smiled. He thought it was because I didn't know. He was wrong. My name is Willow. And this is the story of how I stayed married for 5 years to a man who thought he was the smartest person in the room. The story of how I smiled through every lie, every late night, every excuse. And the story of the day I finally stopped smiling. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. If you've ever been belittled by someone who should have loved you, stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you will deeply affect you. It started as it always does, slow, quiet, like water rising in a closed elevator. Damien and I met when I was 28. I was a primary school teacher in a Chicago suburb, living alone in a one-room apartment. I didn't have many books or enough counter space. Every Saturday morning, he would walk into the coffee shop where I reviewed my papers, knock over my stack of essays, and spend 20 minutes helping me rearrange them. He finally got my number. His demeanor and mannerisms were incredibly appealing to me. He had the ability to make you feel like you were the only important person in your life, to make every word you said feel captivating. He remembered little things: my favorite flower, the title of my first favorite book, how I drank my coffee. He called as promised. He arrived early. He made me feel chosen. We got married 2 months after we met. There weren't many people at the wedding, just our families and close friends. My mother cried. His mother hugged me and whispered, "Welcome to the family, sweetie." Damien held my hand throughout the entire reception and never once looked at anyone else. My 2 years together were wonderful. He only had eyes for me. It wasn't just a fairy tale, it was truly beautiful. Our Sunday mornings were filled with coffee and puzzles. Then we'd discuss what to watch, and we always watched what I wanted. We were building a marriage together, or so I thought. Then, in the second year, there were late nights coming home, business dinners, staying out all night claiming he was at work. When I asked about it, he always answered me, always gently, always logically. I told myself I was being paranoid, that good men work hard, that trust is a choice, and I chose to trust him. That was my first and biggest mistake. Trusting people wasn't wrong, but trusting him instead of my own eyes was the real mistake. The characteristic of being a teacher is that you can read people better. The homework they don't do, the friends they fight with, the home situations they can't yet put into words. You learn to see the truth behind what people show you. I started to see Damien's true self in the third year. He wore a perfume that wasn't mine, a name that appeared in phone notifications and disappeared when he noticed me, Lily. The way he laughed differently during some phone calls, more relaxed, lighter, like a man who had nothing to hide because he thought no one was watching him. He hadn't realized I was watching him. That was his first mistake. I didn't confront him about what he did. It wasn't that I was afraid or that I had nothing to say, but I didn't confront him because the moment I understood what was happening, something cold and clear settled in my chest and whispered, "Not yet." First, I needed to know everything, so I decided to watch him. At dinner, I smiled, asked how his day was, and gave him a goodnight kiss. And in the quiet hours he slept beside me, I began to form a picture of who my husband really was. Damien wasn't just having an affair. He was transferring money, our savings, the account in my name, to a separate account I didn't know existed. First small amounts, then larger amounts. He'd been doing this for over a year. He wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to leave me with nothing. Actually, we could have had a good life. What I saw on the phone that afternoon while sitting in my car in the school parking lot deeply affected me, But it wasn't a catastrophe. Actually, I wasn't angry either. It was just that his feelings for her were clear. Yes, they had become clear. He already thinks he's won, I thought. He doesn't realize the game hasn't even started yet. That's when I made my plan, the one that would soon change everything. I wouldn't say it was easy. I just smiled, kept smiling, because everything, according to the plan, required patience and a certain amount of time, sensitivity. And I had an advantage Damien never expected. He completely underestimated me. The things he didn't know about me could fill a hole the size of a house foundation. He didn't know that 3 months after finding the secret account, I silently moved back every dollar he transferred. Enough to make the balance look the same as he expected. He was so careful, so gradual, so arrogant about his plan that he never thought to double-check. He didn't know that I spent those 5 years doing something other than teaching, smiling, and playing the role of the perfect wife. Something quiet. Something that would be extremely important when the time came. From the meeting I had scheduled for next Thursday. He had no idea. And he didn't know that by the end of that week, nothing in his life would ever look the same. There's a moment, and maybe you know this feeling, when you stop fearing someone who hurt you and start feeling something almost like pity. Not the weak kind, the sharp-eyed kind. The kind where you look at someone and think, you don't realize how much of a burden you've placed on yourself. I felt it when I smiled at Damien at breakfast that last morning. He asked how I slept. I slept perfectly. He couldn't sleep at home that night because he had an important meeting. Of course, I hadn't rushed into anything I was going to do for him. Meanwhile, he hadn't felt that anything was different. In fact, he never noticed. But I want you to stay with me, because what happened that Thursday, something I'd been silently preparing for 5 years, was something no one could have predicted. Not Damien, not Lily, not anyone who thought they knew how this story would end. The things I'd prepared for that day, I was so eager to put them into action. If you're still here, I want you to know that. Stories like this, it exists, because people like you seek it out. If that resonates with you, if you know someone who needs to hear that patience and honor are far more powerful than revenge, share it with them. And if you want to hear what happens next, what I've truly built over all these years, make sure you subscribe, because this story isn't over yet. The meeting on Thursday was at 9 o'clock. I wore a navy suit because Damien said it made me look ordinary. I had my hair neatly pulled back, not even wearing any jewelry. I wore flat shoes and was generally dressed simply, ready for what was to come. This was intentional. Hargrove and Partners' offices were on the 14th floor of a glass building in downtown Chicago. Family law, asset protection, financial litigation. The kind of firm where the waiting room has actual artwork on the walls and the coffee actually tastes like coffee. I'd been quietly meeting with them for 4 months, always during school hours. I always paid in cash from an account Damien didn't know about. Because what Damien didn't know about me was this: without being a teacher. Before she became his wife, before she became the woman who smiled quietly, who wanted nothing and seemed to want very little, I had worked for 2 years at my uncle's real estate company right after graduating from college. I understood contracts. I understood what the words in the documents really meant, differently than people assumed they meant. And the moment I found out what Damien was doing, I knew exactly how to use that information. I documented every transfer he made, every account, every date, every amount. The secret account that was only in his name, the money that came out of our joint savings account, the trail of paperwork he took so carefully to make invisible. It wasn't invisible, not for me. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Patterson, had spent 4 months making my documents flawless. When I sat across from her that Thursday, the financial misconduct case in our marriage wasn't a theory. It was a file, a very thick file. "We're ready," she said to me, "whenever you're ready." That morning, Damien had asked me how I slept at breakfast, told me not to wait for him. I thought about it. 5 years of late nights, soft talk, and that almost genuine smile I'd worn for so long. "I'm ready," I said. The divorce papers were filed that afternoon. Damien found out the way I planned. Not from me, not from a conversation, not from a dramatic scene. He found out when his lawyer called him at 4:47 p.m. on Thursday. According to his location history, he was having dinner with Lily at a restaurant 12 blocks from our house. I know exactly when he found out because that's when he called me. 6 times in 4 minutes. I sat on our living room couch, a cup of tea in my hand, watching my phone light flash and forwarding each call to voicemail. I answered the 7th call. Willow. His voice was different. That softness was gone. "What did you do?" "I filed for divorce, Damien." "Unbelievable. The accounts. How did you know?" "I documented everything," I said quietly. "Every transfer. Every date. Going back 14 months. Silence. "You knew." His voice had changed again. It was smaller now. "How long have you known?" I thought back to the night in 3rd grade when I first saw Lily's name on his phone, the parking lot where I sat with the financial documents on my screen, the dinners, breakfasts, goodnight kisses, and smiles we shared for 5 years. "Long enough," I said. He came home that night. Of course he came. He sat opposite me at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd smiled at him 1,000 times, and he tried everything. He apologized. He'd made mistakes. Lily meant nothing. He could explain the money. It wasn't what it seemed. He was trying to protect his future in a way I wouldn't understand, but he could explain it. I let him speak. When he finally ran out of words, I slid a single piece of paper across the table toward him. "What is this?" he asked. "A summary," I said. "Below is a list of all assets that will be considered marital property in court. Mrs. Patterson's contact information is at the bottom. Expect to hear from your lawyer by Monday." He looked at the paper, then at me. And I saw something change in his face, that look I'd been waiting to see for 5 years. Not anger, not charm. Just the bare, vulnerable expression of a man who finally realizes that the person he'd despised all along has been 3 steps ahead of him. "You planned this," he said. "You planned yours too," I said. "I just planned mine better." I want to be honest with you about something. There was no moment of triumph. There was no scene where I stood over him triumphantly while dramatic music played. The truth about the end of a marriage, even a bad one, is that it mostly just feels like exhaustion. Like finally dropping something so heavy that you've carried it for so long and your arms can't feel it anymore. What I felt that night wasn't satisfaction. It was relief. A quiet, immense relief. The divorce took 8 months. Mrs. Patterson was extraordinary. The financial irregularities meant the secret account, and everything in it was included in the settlement. I kept the house, not because I wanted to live in it, but because I chose it, and choice matters. 6 months later, I sold it and used the money to take a year off from teaching and travel. Something I'd quietly dreamed of for years but never voiced aloud because it didn't fit the life I was living. Damien and Lily stayed together for 4 more months after the divorce was finalized. I heard this from a mutual friend, relayed in that particular tone people use when they think you want to feel like you're right. I didn't feel right. I didn't feel much about it. What I felt on Tuesday morning in a small town on the Oregon coast, with a coffee in my hand and the Pacific Ocean in front of me, was freedom. That's what I want you to take away from Willow's story. My story. The strongest thing I did during the breakdown of a 5-year marriage wasn't the paperwork. It wasn't the lawyer, the financial strategy, or the perfectly timed Thursday morning filing. The strongest thing I did was refuse to be someone I wasn't. I didn't yell, I didn't break things, or fall apart in a way that would feel satisfying for 10 minutes, but then cause me to lose everything. I stayed calm. I stayed clear. I stayed myself. People who look down on quiet women always make the same mistake. They assume that softness means weakness, that patience means obedience. They think a woman who smiles, who asks for nothing, and who seems to ask for very little isn't paying attention. We always pay attention. If this story touched something in you, if you were the one who was ignored, underestimated, excluded in the room, I want you to know that your patience is not weakness, it's preparation. And if you want more stories like this, about women who refuse to be defined by the worst things that happen to them, click the like button. It's a small thing, but it means everything to get these stories to people who need them. And subscribe. Not because I'm asking, but because in next week's story, I'll be talking about a woman who, on the morning of her own retirement party, discovered that her business partner had been taking credit for her work for 20 years. I'm still thinking about how she used that information over the next 48 hours. I'm Willow, and I smiled for 5 years. Every single one of those smiles was worth it. If you enjoy watching stories where pain turns into strength, you're welcome to my channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments.